It's the Brad and John Show.
And this is C Block, Charlie Block, FAR, April 24th, 2025. We start this about 7:40, and the reason I give that is because a lot of people listen to this show in the future. We do it live. We're live right now, 7 to 8 o'clock on Westplex Talk 104.5. And if you're listening to the future, that'll give you a reference as to what the date is. That way, some of the things will make sense we're saying. Okay, now, a couple more things on my list to talk about this morning, okay? Do you know the number one place not to be when lightning strikes? Do you know where most people are killed by lightning strikes?
Is it in their car?
No, it's not.
Is it in the shower?
No, it's when they're fishing.
Oh, well, yeah, on a body of water. Why would you be on the water when there's lightning?
Well, I thought this was interesting because of the fact that their story I read, and those of us in the radio business, I used to like lightning until I got into the radio business and then started hitting towers and things like that, talks about the fact that North Carolina officer becomes nation's first lightning death of 2025 after being struck while fishing. Guy was 39 years old. He was fishing on April 11th. And it talks about the worst place to be is on a body of water in a boat. And because if you know the way lightning works, lightning typically strikes the tallest spot in any location. So if you're on a body of water, the water is flat as a board, and even if you're like a little John boat, you're sticking up above the water, and that's where lightning's going to strike. So, and to me, it's I read this, thought to myself, okay, why would you be out fishing when there's a storm? Now, it talks about the fact that the problem with this is, and you think, well, why would you do that? Well, if you're in a small lake, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're like in a big lake and you're like a mile from shore and all of a sudden a storm rolls in, you might not have a choice to the point where you're like, okay, because you know how it is. Even around here, we've had some storms recently where you go outside and the sun's out. You go outside and half an hour later and it looks
Here
like...
Here comes the storm. Yeah, and if you're, to your point, Brad, if you're in a little John boat with a little motor, you might not be able to make it to shore.
Right. You may not be able to make it to shore in time, which I thought was interesting. Okay.
That's really sad.
Well, it is. Now, you sent me this story yesterday, which I thought was interesting. And this is the story about, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
The North County Farms. John, what the hell is going on with this? This sounds like a huge FUBAR mess.
Yeah, so I'm bringing up the story. I didn't know if we were going to talk about it today. So the St. Louis County Council has decided to appropriate $3.2 million. And while I mention this, Brad, if you could bring the story up, because I don't have it up in front of me. The St. Louis County Council decided to appropriate $3.2 million to urban farms. And we're describing urban as, I guess that's technically a misnomer if you ask me, because Brad and I, as regular listeners know, both spent our formative years in Spanish Lake, which is an unincorporated area near the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi River. And there's some good land there, I guess, that you could farm up there. And there are some fertile fields up there. The idea is that the area has become a food desert. And as we know, one of the social justice arguments, one of the reasons why we have so much obesity and health problems in the Black community is because Black people would choose to eat more healthy food if they could, but there's not enough healthy food around for them to eat. So the St. Louis County Council appropriated, in quite a hurry, should come back to that, appropriated $3.2 million to an urban farming program with the goal of taking what's grown, or goat milk and other products and things like that, in Spanish Lake, and setting up, there's a bodega site, a little farmer's market site that would be permanent, where folks could go and get fresh food. And the crux of the matter, what was reported by Kelsey Landis in the Post-Dispatch yesterday, I believe it's probably in the print edition today, was that some of the folks that were involved in this program under the umbrella of the bigger program have said they don't want to be a part of this anymore, and that something smells very fishy about this.
The lady...
And then, Brad, the woman who is actually quarterbacking this whole effort, her last name is Lewis, and she runs a group called Rustic Roots in Spanish Lake. Her version of the story to the reporter was that these other folks didn't submit the proper paperwork. They didn't show that they were the proper landowners. They either did not submit soil samples, or they did not show a willingness to submit soil samples. And then when the reporter reached out to these folks and she told them what this other woman, Lewis from Rustic Roots, said, they went apoplectic. And Kelsey Landis, the reporter, says that these folks were, quote, furious, unquote, and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're choosing to not be a part of this program because something fishy is going on. This is a boondoggle and something is corrupt in this story.
Well, here's my problem with the whole thing. And you and I being North County natives, okay? I can jump in my car and I can drive to North County. And I go to North County, I don't know, I don't want to say on a regular basis, but I go up there from time to time. I still love North County. I mean, I'm telling you, if I were going to,
You would buy a house up there. So when you're up there, what do you see, Brad?
Well, if you drive up on Lindbergh, let's say you go 270, you go north of Lindbergh, you pass a Deerbergs. And if you walk into the Deerbergs, there's all sorts of fresh fruit there. There's fresh vegetables and fresh fruit. You don't have to drive too far. Matter of fact, if you're going north on Lindbergh, first you pass the Schnooks, which is right there at, what is that, Manresa or whatever it is. It's got
but let's get closer to Spanish Lake, right there at 270.
Yeah,
and Bell Fountain Road, there's a Schnooks right there.
Yes, there's a Schnooks right there, 270 Bell Fountain. A matter of fact, when I was a kid, I mean, that Schnooks was actually built after I was, that shows you how old I am. But I mean, that I was in walking distance of my house, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't understand what they're talking about, this food desert. Now, it's John. Am I missing something? Are there areas of North County that are protected, that have like barbed wire where you can't, you're in an area where you can't move out of it? Are you like in a Stalag 13 environment or something like that? I mean,
no, I guess the argument is, and we're going to get real North County here, but folks can visualize this in their own neck of the woods. There are some areas in Spanish Lake where if you lived in the countryside, what was formerly known as countryside projects, or the areas like those apartment complex, Schnooks might be a mile away, and if you don't have a car, I guess it would be hard to get there. Now, to me, and Kelsey Landis actually points this out in one of these pieces. I'm not sure if it was today's or a piece last week, but there is a Schnooks within, I think she says like 1.2 miles or something like that from the center. But let's get back to this story, though, Brad. So did you go through this, and did you see some of the things that the folks who have chosen to not be a part of this program have said? And the woman's name, we should do her justice here. Her name is Janet Lewis,
right,
from Rustic Roots.
Janet Lewis, and apparently, as I understand it, and I read the story a couple times. I read it last night. I read this morning before we went on the air. As I understand it, she's going to get the money. She's going to get the $3.2 million, and then she's going to essentially pay the other people. So she's sort of like the master farmer, and she's paying the farmers, subcontractors. Isn't that
That's
the way?
Exactly how I read it too, Brad.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the curious thing here, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the curious thing is, Kelsey Landis says, quote, Councilwoman Shalonda Webb, who introduced the bill, has said the money will go to Rustic Roots in the form of a grant, so it doesn't need to go to bid. So in other words, this is not like the county council putting something out to bid and say, hey, we want somebody that's got a good idea for resolving food desert challenges. This is just a grant. So Shalonda Webb, and look, I don't know I've never met Shalonda. I know nothing about Shalonda Webb other than she's a North County Democrat. But her point is, it's just a grant, and she apparently cried with joy when this passed the county council. She, I guess, according to Kelsey Landis, originally said that they needed more time to look at this and discuss it, and then one time brought it up for a vote with the council quickly, and then it passed. But what bothers me, Brad, is the fact that it appears as though folks who were in on this are now completely out and say they want nothing to do with it. And this Lewis woman is saying, well, it's because I'm trying to have high standards here, and these folks don't meet my standards. And when the folks were told that, they're like, whoa, that's not what happened at all. We just think this whole thing is shady.
Well, John, this is Brad. This is my stupid theory of things. Okay, how many tens of millions of dollars, and I'm going to make, and I'm not going to weave too far away, but let me just make my point here. Okay, how many tens of millions of dollars? Isn't it like 50 or 60 or 70 million dollars they threw into the Loop Trolley deal in U City and Western St. Louis City?
Yeah, the toy train.
Right, okay. And I said all along, instead of tearing up Del Mar. And I know of two people that I know personally that had businesses on Del Mar. And if you know the whole story, when they tore up Del Mar to put the trolley tracks in, it really impacted the local business people, because it got to be the people were like, oh my God, I'm not going down the Del Mar Loop. Traffic there's terrible. It's all torn up, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Rather than spend $60 or $70 million and buy these old trolley cars, which nobody figured out that they weren't ADA compatible, and they didn't have any air conditioning or heat in them, but yet it's an old trolley car and we should love the way things used to be, I said, instead of spending $54 million, why don't you spend $10 million and buy a fleet of shuttle buses? And you have 5 or 6 or maybe 10 shuttle buses, and you stage those shuttle buses so that every 5 minutes, one of those shuttle buses is at a stop on the loop. And the door opens, you can get in, you can, get on the shuttle bus, and you can, go a half mile up Del Mar and get out at the next stop. And then at the end of the turnaround where it goes, like where U City Hall, if you know, like that, the bus goes back.
That's a great compromise, Brad. That's a great idea.
The bus.
So, and your point is, let's take that analogy and bring it back to Spanish Lake.
Well, and let's this county council, let's buy a couple of trucks and go to Schnucks and go to Deerbergs and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Every morning, we're going to have one of our county fruit and vegetable trucks show up at Schnucks, and we're going to buy this from you, Schnucks or Deerbergs, or maybe a wholesale produce guy, and say, we're going to put on this truck, we're going to put apples and oranges and pears and squashes and potatoes and all this kind of stuff, and we're just going to drive through, quote unquote, the food deserts and give the stuff away. And the truck will cost us $100,000. We'll have to have somebody to drive it. We'll have to pay for the fruit and vegetable. You could probably do that for quite some period of time for $3.2 million. Couldn't you, John?
Yeah, I think so. But let's think better than that, though, Brad. Why couldn't you say that we want to keep this project going on? We're going to miss the 2025 growing season, but we're going to do this the right way. We want to have, part of the thing that, again, Kelsey Landis in the Post-Dispatch points out, there doesn't seem to be, Miss Lewis didn't make it clear what she's going to do with her piece of the money or how much of this she takes. At least that's how I viewed Kelsey Landis's piece. So why don't you say, instead of rushing this through, we're going to miss the 2025 growing season, and then come in 2026, we'll be ready and we'll have a plan, and we'll have legitimate businesses be able to produce, goat milk or vegetables or collard greens or whatever we want to give for the food desert and sell at the food desert. Let's put a decent plan together. Why are we rushing this?
John, but you said a key phrase in what you just said, which to me is the glaring error in this whole program. The growing season. It's January, and you live in the food desert in North County. You think, oh, I'm going to go over to whatever it is. What do they call it? Rustic Roots Sanctuary, whatever it is. I'm going to go over. I'm going to go to Rustic Roots Sanctuary and get some lettuce. And you go over there and you realize, oh, there is no lettuce because it's January. There is no
lettuce in January. Nope.
Nothing's growing. Nothing's growing from November.
And, maybe you're able to get some goat milk or some eggs or whatever you're able to get. But that's exactly it, Brad. And I just think it's the rush nature of this. And how do you possibly make an argument that we need to rush this through and with very little transparency here?
John, the thing that bothers me, to me, there's a bigger picture issue with this whole thing. It makes North County look like Czechoslovakia after World War II. That it's
it's a bombed out Beirut, and that there's nowhere to get food, and people are starving.
Exactly. And I've told you stories about how I've driven through North County, and people talk about, oh, it's so sad. You go in North County, and the homes are so dilapidated. I'm telling you, maybe I'm in the wrong neighborhood, but I'm driving through Hazelwood, I'm driving through Florissant, I'm driving through Ferguson, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I see some pretty nice houses. Grass looks nicely cut, everything looks like it's in ship shape. I don't see what people are saying. I don't get it.
I think that you could take a national issue, Brad, like food deserts and a national media narrative, and then plop it down in Spanish Lake and say, hey, we want our money too. Now, here's my favorite anecdote. There's a gentleman named Tyrean Lewis, Tyrean Lewis. He runs Heru Urban Farming. He was set to receive $202,500 And he is one of the guys that said, I don't think I'm going to be a part of this. So if a guy that was going to get 200 grand in line to get 200 grand says, you know what, I'm going to pass on 200 grand because I don't like the smell of this whole thing. And he said, there's too many red flags popping up for me. And if an urban entrepreneur is turning down 200 grand, doesn't that tell you something, Brad?
That tells you he's an honest guy, and that tells you there's serious problems with the program. It
tells you maybe is he both an honest guy, and if it wasn't so shady, he might have a hand in it, but he's not willing to go to jail for 200 grand.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about it is there's one thing I would say about that.
What's that, Brad?
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
John, say goodbye.
See you guys tomorrow.